Hi everyone, Scott from Tilly the Lad here. Today I wanted to talk about my general impressions and thoughts on the latest 2D Sonic game, Sonic Superstars. The game released on October 17th, 2023 on all modern platforms. It was developed by a studio called Arzest in cooperation with Sega and Sonic Team. I picked it up for my Xbox Series S. As of this writing, I fully beat the game, as in I beat the final boss. I don't have 100% of the achievements or trophies. This took me just shy of 19 hours to achieve. With all that out of the way, I hope you go on to enjoy the rest of this video. In 2017, Sega and Sonic Team worked with a band of hardcore fans turned passionate developers to release Sonic Mania. It ended up being a critical and commercial success. Many hoped for that team, most of whom formed a new studio called Evening Star, to return and make a sequel with completely unique zones. The two sides were in talks to make a successor, but for whatever reason that sadly didn't pan out and they went their separate ways. Evening Star is currently hard at work in developing a 3D platformer and a new IP called Penny's Big Breakaway. Meanwhile, Sonic Team connected with a Japanese developer called Arzest. On the surface, this may seem like a worrying decision. This was the team that contributed significant work to the much lambasted Balan Wonderworld, from publisher Square Enix. Some of their previous projects include a few minigames in We Play Motion, and Yoshi's New Island and Hey Pikmin on the Nintendo 3DS. These aren't bad games, far from it, but they're not exactly considered standouts either. Don't worry, I hear you Hey Pikmin fans, I know you're out there. But the decision to work with Arzest actually makes sense. The studio's president is a man named Naoto Oshima. He is considered one of the two creators of Sonic. He designed the Blue Blur and also helmed the development of Sonic CD. While I still would have preferred an agreement with Evening Star to work out, I nonetheless think Arzest is a logical partner for this project. Sonic Superstars made its official introductions at the 2022 rendition of Jeff Keighley's annual The Game Awards. I was shocked because I didn't see it coming at all and was taken aback in a very good way, but that cautious optimism, emphasis on cautious, was always present. Fast forward to the game's release nearly a year later, and unfortunately, my first impression of it was not great. It received middling reviews, with some of my favorite and most trusted social media creators and personalities declaring the game anywhere from outright bad at worst to fine or pretty good at best. It has a 4 to 6 hour runtime, and for $60 US, it seemed like it wasn't worth the price of admission. So I waited for a sale. Sonic games are known to do this fairly quickly after release, and I ended up snagging the digital deluxe version for $49 on a Black Friday sale. For some reason, the standard edition didn't get a price cut on the Microsoft Store. I'm not sure what that's about. I immediately went from completing Mario Wonder to this, and that did Superstars no favors. In my first hour or so with it, I had this incessant thought of, oh no, I don't think I like this. But then a curious thing happened. It started to grow on me. I still do have more critiques and frustrations than I'd like, let me be clear. But even taking all that into account, I do like Sonic Superstars. Music is particularly important for Sonic games because it supplements and adds to the sense of flow, speed, and momentum that very few other platformers can offer. I'm therefore a bit sad to report that this title's soundtrack is inconsistent. It has some high highs, but also low lows. A potential reason for that is the game features numerous composers that bring their own style and flair to the table. Perhaps this is an instance of too many head chefs in the kitchen. My biggest complaint is with the tracks that try to mimic the Genesis's 16-bit sound chip. The audio team unfortunately did not pull it off, at least to my ears. It should, however, be noted that there are a few exceptions to this, though the early boss theme is particularly disappointing. It doesn't sound good and is far too repetitive, especially considering some of the boss fights can be quite lengthy. As a result, this soundtrack ranks pretty low on my personal list for the series. Don't get it twisted, there are some genuinely good songs on offer, but Sonic titles are known for their legendary music, and Superstars doesn't quite reach that sky-high reputation. There are many out there who prefer pixel art for 2D platformers, but for what it's worth, I really like the 2.5D direction Arzest went with here. The art team nailed the character designs. They have a much more modern appearance and yet are still faithful to the classic designs. Sonic and friends are well animated and expressive. I especially love the fight stance they take when combating bosses, coupled with the determined look on their faces. Though one minor gripe I have regards Tails. It's probably no surprise that I primarily played as the Kitsune, and I noticed that his post-act celebration comes across as a bit stiff. This doesn't appear to be a problem with other cast members. The game also introduces a new character named Trip, and she looks great. I hope to see her in future installments. Mr. Oshima proved that he still got it. I'm slightly more mixed on the background art. My favorite moments are when the stage rotates around a dynamically changing prominent object in the background. I think this is a fantastic use of the 2.5D graphical direction. It gives the corresponding level a sense of progression and dynamism. The backgrounds err on the side of simplicity. I don't have a problem with this at all. I'd much rather have this than one that is too busy. In those cases, it can be hard to distinguish between what's happening on your plane versus what's happening deeper into the screen. My main gripe is that it is sometimes too simple. A few of the stage backgrounds have extremely low picture fidelity. It was clearly noticeable, off-putting, and sometimes even outright ugly, considering how well the game generally presents itself. Perhaps this is an issue specific to more lower-end hardware. Again, I played this on my Series S. Sonic Team and its partners have historically struggled to recreate the feel of the 16-bit games in 2.5D. The closest they've come, in my opinion anyway, is with the 2D sections in Sonic Generations, but even this was quite off the mark. It was fun in its own unique way, but it fell below the quality bar of the Genesis titles. Nearly all of my fears about this were put to rest when Christian Whitehead, one of the development leads of Sonic Mania and current creative director and lead engine architect at Evening Star, confirmed that Arzest was working with the Retro engine. This is the engine that Whitehead and his team created for Mania. As such, Superstars controls nearly, but not completely identically to the Genesis games. My only gripe is that the characters felt a bit more stiff and unruly in the air. Digital Foundry, in their in-depth look at the game, noted that the Xbox version, for whatever reason, seemed to have the most noticeable input delay. They said this made the characters feel more heavy. I noticed this too when I first started playing, but then that feeling mysteriously faded away. I'm not sure as to why, though I suspect it's because I acclimated to it. The cast retained their unique abilities. Mania introduced the drop dash for Sonic, and I'm very happy to see that become a series staple. In previous installments, like in Sonic 3 and Knuckles, the Hedgehog had two character-specific abilities. He could use the properties of elemental shields, and he had the Insta-Shield. The latter increased his aerial attack range and made him invulnerable for a brief moment. It was a skill that high-level players can make use out of, but there were two problems with this. One, naturally, lower to mid-level players couldn't get the most use out of it, and two, it didn't really make sense for Sonic's character. The drop dash changed that. This allows you to get a quick burst of speed the second you land from a jump. It's a great ability that makes Sonic the quickest character on the ground. It gives you a gameplay reason to play as him that makes sense for his character. Outside of the blue blur, Tails can fly, allowing him access to higher routes, and he also serves as a potential easier mode. Knuckles can glide and climb walls, and Amy has a double jump and can wield her hammer. Sonic's 2D outings run through a spectrum with a heavy emphasis on platforming on one end and a focus on speed and momentum on the other. This isn't to say that the platforming-focused games completely shun speed and physics, or that the more speedy titles have no platforming. I must reiterate that this is a spectrum. These are just my personal thoughts, and I'm sure there will be disagreement, which is totally fine. But here is where I would place some of the more notable installments on the spectrum. On the platformy side, we have the original Genesis title in CD, and on the speedy side, we have Mania, Sonic 2, and Advance 2. I think it logically follows that Superstars, which had a heavy hand from Sonic CD's project lead Naoto Oshima, slots in on the more platform-centric side. That is not a bad thing at all in my book. Us Sonic fans are a particular bunch, and I know there are quite a few out there who hold the opinion of, I just want to go fast. Superstars does give you some room to stretch your legs, but if you fall under this category, then you may be left wanting more, and I can completely understand that. An area where the game excels is in level diversity. Each zone has a clearly identifiable art style, aesthetic, and gimmicks. Acts within each zone can also shake things up. Bridge Island's second act takes place at dusk as opposed to midday. Speed Jungle transitions to a darker, seemingly deeper part of the jungle. Pinball Carnival goes from a cheery vibe to a more haunting tone. This helped keep the adventure fresh, and I was always excited to see what a new zone had to offer. The character-specific stages are one of my favorite new additions to the core level structure that I hope returns in future outings. Every once in a while, a new zone will house a third act that only a specific cast member can run through. I think this is where the level designers flex some of their most creative ideas because they built these stages around the character's unique abilities and traits. The Sonic act is all about speed, grinding on vines, and features a showdown with Fang. Amy's level emphasizes the use of her hammer and also shows off her kind and warm-hearted nature. You'll occasionally see other characters doing something in the background. For example, in Speed Jungle, if you're playing as Sonic, you'll see Tails battling a few badniks. It's a really minor addition in theory, but I love it in practice. It, along with the character-specific levels, helps convey the sense that the whole gang is contributing in the quest to defeat Eggman. Performance on the Series S was stable, as one would probably expect. This game did release on last-gen hardware and the Switch too. Things did unfortunately fall apart more often in the later stages. I ran into bugs and glitches that included puzzling hitboxes, rings that fell through the floor. I straight up fell through the floor once, and there were instances where my character ran through rings but didn't collect them. They happened often enough to be annoying and worth putting in this review, but not enough for me to consider them game-breaking. The boss fights are perhaps the most widely criticized aspect of Sonic Superstars. I believe this is the case for two main reasons. First, you can only hit a boss's weakness once per cycle. This is usually after a lengthy attack phase. It contrasts sharply against the boss fights featured in the 16-bit entries and Mania. There, anytime Eggman or his henchmen were in range, you could nail them regardless if they were attacking. You could also hit them as many times as you wanted when they did expose their weaknesses. This rewarded skillful play and pattern recognition, and also made each engagement go by much quicker. Second, and probably more important, the boss fights are exceptionally long. The Act 2 engagements in particular can have 2 phases and last as long as 4 to 5 minutes. Some late game ones even exceed 6, 7, or 8 minutes. There is no checkpoint system mid-fight, so you can probably imagine how frustrating it might be to have to restart from the very beginning if you die late in Phase 2. This happened to me quite a few times, and it was absolutely infuriating and demoralizing. For these two reasons, I agree that the boss fights are the weakest part of the experience. They make it really hard for me to recommend this game to someone who maybe has an interest in Sonic games and wants to dive in with this one, which, as of this writing, is understandable because it's the newest one. Further still, I struggle to recommend it even if you are a more established but casual fan of the series. I do think the bosses are designed well in terms of their moment-to-moment gameplay. Maybe that's a hot take. They have varied attacks to dodge and patterns to recognize. They're unique and creative. Some of the Emerald powers are quite useful in these engagements too. It is really rewarding when you intuit what ability can drastically help you emerge victorious. When all of these elements come together, they make the boss encounters engaging and fun. But it's especially that second critique, that they can be excruciatingly long, that well and truly brings them down, along with the entire rest of the game, unfortunately. If the team at RZS somehow happens across this video, the most important piece of feedback that I can provide is please put checkpoints after Phase 1 of the 2-phase bosses. I believe this simple edit alone would vastly improve player experience. Sonic's previous 2D adventures have largely dropped the ball when it comes to cranking up the difficulty toward game's end. The usual culprits are bottomless pits and cruelly placed stage hazards, usually spikes, and enemies. Superstars stumbles into this very same pitfall. Once you complete the main game, you'll unlock Trip's story. This is her run-through of the campaign, giving her perspective on things, and it serves as the game's hard mode. Nearly all the trappings I just mentioned rear their ugly mugs once again. Some have coined this sort of level design as beginner's traps, in the sense that you can't avoid what's coming your way unless you've already played the game and know what to expect. I'm frankly shocked and baffled that RZest repeats the same mistakes as their predecessors. Quite a few of us Sonic fans have extensively and loudly complained about this design in the past, and I'm not sure why developers keep doing it. It makes me wonder if there are people out there that enjoy this. Please comment below if you are one of them. I'd love to hear your perspective. That's not to say Trip's story is abysmal. I know some despised it, but I had fun with it. There were times where I thought the challenge was very difficult, but also fair. The boss fights were ever so slightly varied, with more deadly attacks, and take a little bit more punishment before going down. I thought they were engaging, and I enjoyed the shakeup. Trip has her own abilities that make it fun to retread familiar ground. She shares the double jump with Amy, but can also turn into a spiky ball that clings onto walls and ceilings. This opens up more exploration possibilities as well as creative level design. The three most recent Sonic games have introduced new characters into the fold. Frontiers debuted Sage, Dream Team introed REM, and Superstars has Trip. I love all of them and want to see them return in future titles. The Chaos Emeralds make their obvious and expected return, but with a twist. A giant gold ring can be found throughout each level that teleport you to the special stage. These stages are okay. They're Spider-Man-like in that you swing onto different latch points. These are either the familiar blue orbs, rings that increase your time limit, boost pads that launch you forward or upward and sometimes contain a batch of rings, or mines that decrease your time and stun you for a few moments. The goal is to catch up to the emerald and homing attack it to collect it. The new addition here is that each emerald comes with a power-up. These abilities run the gambit from situational and forgettable to useful more generally. My personal favorite is the first one you get, the Avatar ability. This floods the screen with clones of yourself, damaging any poor enemy that gets in the way. It was invaluable in helping me take down some of the game's more difficult bosses. I also think it looks ridiculous, and it occasionally got a good chuckle out of me. I also wanted to give a nod to the water power-up. It is more on the situational side of things, but it helps make the dreaded underwater level much more manageable. I hope the Emerald powers become a staple in future entries. I have a few ideas for new ones. A ring emerald that drops a few rings around you could be incredibly valuable in a pinch, especially if you are embroiled in a difficult boss fight. It would also be cool if there was a rewind emerald that undoes, say, the past 3 seconds of gameplay. You can think of this like the rewind feature that Forza games have. Among other things, this could give players a safety option to correct the mistake they made because mistakes happen. These are definitely not the most creative, but I for one would have gotten plenty of use out of them in this game. Each act also contains giant blue rings. These transport you to the same special stages that house the emeralds, the only difference being, of course, that you're tracking down medals. These can be obtained in a few other ways. For example, lives are no more here, so now the reward for getting 100 rings is a medal. This is a currency that you can use in the game's shop to customize your robotic avatar for the competitive battle mode. I have only a passing interest in the battle mode, and I only touched it because of this review, so unfortunately, the medals are largely superfluous to me. I had very little incentive for entering the bonus stages. I wish the medals had more utility in-game because my problem with them isn't their existence. This is just me spitballing, but maybe you could use them to unlock more skins or otherwise customize members of the main cast. Maybe you could save up and unlock extra levels for some of the zones. I much preferred how Sonic Origins handled this. That game had a very similar system but with gold, star-crested coins. You could use these coins to purchase items in the museum, which included cool knickknacks such as promotional art from throughout the series' history. Sonic Superstars introduces 2 new multiplayer modes. The first is a couch co-op experience where you and up to 3 friends can run through the adventure together. I was always skeptical of this because previous installments in the series have tried this, albeit with only 2 players as opposed to 4, and it never seemed to work out as well as it maybe could. The big issue was, and reportedly very much still remains, that if you're not playing as the character the camera locks onto, then you will quickly fall off screen and have to wait to respawn. I wasn't able to try the co-op because A, very few of my friends are fellow Sonic fans, good for them, and B, this is local only and it's pretty hard to get adults in the same place with conflicting schedules and whatnot. The second mode is a competitive battle mode where up to 8 players compete in a free-for-all setting over certain objectives. The game often tries to funnel you here with medals and semi-frequent reminders that you can spend this currency in the shop. Each session of this mode takes place over the course of 3 rounds. There is a Jenga-style survival game where you have to be the last person standing. Then you go to an arena battle where you try to KO opponents with your electrical attack. The last round is a simple race to the finish. At the end of all that, the game tallies up your totals and boots players off the stage as it lists out the standings in descending order. This is a nice little feature. You don't know for sure who won unless you were doing the math throughout the rounds, so this adds some tension. I tried searching for matches on a Saturday night at 9 p.m. and I couldn't find any fellow players. It was just bots. Maybe that's a weird time to search. If not, it indicates that this multiplayer is dead not even a few months after launch. To my surprise though, I found the battle mode to be mildly entertaining and a nice little distraction. The main single player campaign can get a bit stressful, so I can see this serving as a chill breath of fresh air. It kind of reminds me how fellow Sega franchise Super Monkey Ball often comes with a party mode full of mini games. I don't mind the battle mode's existence in Superstars, and I'm not opposed to it potentially making a return. I thought the races were the most fun, so maybe the developers can expand upon that next time. I think it would be cool if there was an elimination element where the player in last place gets eliminated and the round goes until there's one person left. Maybe there can also be a Grand Prix where players race through 3 or 4 courses. Sonic Superstars has its low points. It made a mediocre first impression. Some of that was its own fault, some of it wasn't. The game repeats the very same mistakes as its predecessors when trying to design more challenging stages. The late game bosses are tedious, infuriating, sometimes even boring, and absolutely overstay their welcome. Many out there consider Superstars fine at best, some flat out don't like it. I can completely understand those opinions. Even with these considerable flaws, I found a lot to enjoy in this package. A lot of that may be due to nostalgia. Those of you who have followed me on this journey for a while may know that I got my start in gaming with the 16-bit Genesis and the original Sonic. This game is made out of the same stuff. Many doubted if Superstars was worth the $60 asking price. That is of course a value proposition for you to decide yourself. It is admittedly dubious on the surface. Any percent completion, meaning defeating the last boss in the main story mode, takes about 4 to 5 hours. All I can do is provide my opinion, and in my opinion, it is worth that to me. RZest surprised me with the quality of their output. I had a lot of fun running through the zones they designed. They provided many new additions to the 2D Sonic formula that I hope become staples moving forward. These include character-specific acts, occasionally seeing or running into other members of the cast in the background, emerald powers, and fun little minigames that you can play in a competitive setting. Before capturing footage for this video, I ultimately put just shy of 19 hours into the game, and I find that to be a solid amount of playtime for the price I paid. I wouldn't mind if Sonic Team gave RZest an opportunity to make a follow-up or sequel. I only hope they build upon what they did well and take the critical feedback to heart. They have the potential to make a great game in this series. Whether they do, of course, remains to be seen. Thank you everyone for watching, and until next time, take care.